So you might be asking yourself, who is this girl and why is she giving me advice? Well, my new friend, let me take a moment and introduce myself to you. I, like so many of us, had a really difficult, challenging childhood. The type of childhood that left me wondering if I was lovable, if I was good enough, what will my life be like? How will I be in relationships? Will I recognize love? How will I be as a mom? How will I treat myself when I'm older? What kind of relationships will I allow into my life as I grow? I always looked at life on a deeper level. I always felt a little bit different. And I also really found it to be soul level important for me to make sure that the people around me felt loved and that they mattered and that they were included. And eventually one day I realized that I needed to include myself in those values. So I've been on this journey where I've been collecting inspiration through ideas and through material that I've learned and through experiences that I've had and through every person that I've ever worked with on my journey or every friend who shared their story with me. And I realized that there's a part of me that's an educator that wants to share this information, that wants to share my experience and my knowledge that I've obtained throughout my life and spending my life just studying relationships and practicing the skills and tweaking them to make them even work for me even better. And on my journey, I went from being somebody who didn't know if I was lovable, if I could ever really be loved, if I was enough. I was an extreme people pleaser. I was codependent. And now, in my late 30s, I am an empowered woman. I am assertive. I do not settle for relationships that are good enough. They need to be incredible to stay in my life. I have broken the cycle, and I have an incredible marriage. And I have a son that I absolutely adore and feel beyond grateful that I get to be his mom. So I wanted to create this podcast for you, dear listener, because maybe some of the things that I've experienced or I've learned on my journey is something that you can apply to yours, or you can tweak it and make it your own to fit your journey so that you can allow yourself and give space for yourself to grow and become who you've always wanted to be, who you're meant to be on that soul level. So not only do I have my own life experiences, I have also spent my life working in the behavioral health field, in the mental health field, and I've also made sure that I have the credentials and the education to fully understand, and I continue to take trainings every year to make sure that I am up to date and that I am continuing to learn and practice the skills that are really truly going to help me create the best relationships that I possibly can have in my life, including and especially the relationship with myself. Through my journey, I learned that the most important relationship I'll ever have is the relationship with me. And I need to start there. And then it just ripples out and influences every other relationship that I have. So I do have a bachelor's in health and human development, a master's in marriage and family therapy. I also have an associate's degree as a wellness practitioner, which means that I also am a certified hypnotist. I'm a certified family life educator. I've studied holistic nutrition and also life coaching. So I've really spent my time studying this area so that I can tie in the research-based skills with the experiences that life has given me as well, so that I can deliver you experts and resources and awesome conversation that will hopefully give you some things to think about and maybe shift your perspective or try out for yourself and see what you like and throw away what you don't. And anyway, I'm just so honored that you're here to share a piece of your journey with me. And again, I hope that part of my journey can positively influence yours. Welcome to the Beautifully Changed podcast. I'm Steph Hamas, and I'm delighted you're here. Now, let's make your relationships awesome. Well, hello there, my beautiful friends. I am so happy to have you back to the Beautifully Changed podcast, or if it is your first time here, welcome, and there's a place for you at the table. You are loved, and we are so happy to have you here. We, as in myself and the Beautifully Changed community. And today, I am so loving this conversation that I have with Thomas. His name is Thomas Westenholz, and he is joining me from London. So how cool is that? And he is the founder of zensensa.com, the leading institute for relationship intimacy. So you know I'm a huge fan already. Thomas is the author of 2 books on relationship, intimacy, and sexuality. So I am going to have him on again, and we're going to talk about sexuality. So if you have any questions that you want to make sure that we address, please make sure to DM me at Beautifully Changed on Instagram to make sure that your questions get answered. Also, Thomas is trained in somatic relationship and sexuality. He did that in San Francisco. He developed a 3-step framework for couple intimacy and love. So he's definitely put his experience, his knowledge into practice, and he is using his process to help couples. And hopefully you will have your notebook and a pen handy so that you can take notes and write down and try whatever really kind of spoke to you and apply it in your own relationship. So as I said, I loved my conversation with Thomas. He was really fun to have on. I can't wait to have him on again so we can talk about sexuality. So again, if you have questions around sexuality, just know that there is no taboo topics for us to talk about in this community. It's all about growing and understanding and accepting ourselves more. So if we can talk about something that will be a part of your path in a positive way, I want to provide that for you. So let's do it. But today we are talking about relationships and intimacy and love languages and all of that good stuff. But we're really going to focus on the process to create and cultivate intimacy and love and safety in your relationship. So go ahead and get cozy while we dive into our conversation. Thomas, welcome to the Beautifully Changed podcast. I am so delighted to have you with me today.
My pleasure. I really look forward to our conversation today, Stephanie.
I'm so excited. I love just diving into relationship talk. It's one of my favorite subjects, and it must be one of yours because you've dedicated your life to understanding relationships.
Yeah, and I'm still learning. I think that's the beauty about relationship is we're never going to know everything, and every dynamic is different in slightly different ways. So it's an ongoing process, and I'm certainly not perfect.
Oh my gosh, I love that. It is definitely like a lifelong journey because the relationships are always, even if it's the same relationship, it's always kind of flowing and shifting and all of that together, right?
Yeah, and I think people tend to think if you're a relationship expert, you get it all right and you're perfect. And I always have to tell people that is not the case. I said, I mess up like everybody else. I have triggers and a past history and baggage. And I think it's more about, and this is what we'll probably talk more about as we move on in the podcast, it's more about getting self-awareness, both about self and our partner. And that's really what it's about, which makes it so beautiful because it's something where it never ends and we always can learn new things about our partner and about ourselves. And this is also where relationships keep growing rather than go static.
I love that. And I also just love that you're saying that we just have this self-awareness about ourselves and our partner. And what the beautiful part about that is the more we learn about our partner, and if we're willing to apply what we learn, it can make for a really great relationship. The kind of stuff that we all kind of want, right?
Yeah, it really can. And what I think is so amazing, and I think, again, we'll touch on this as we move on, is that a lot of these ideas are so enormously simple. It's not complicated. And yet nobody teaches us these skills. We don't learn them, even though they're so utterly important. And the way I really got into this was actually because 7 years ago, I founded a business that did social and emotional learning programs for children. And we were trying to teach these skills to children in the schools here in the UK. And I saw this clear pattern that basically the issues that we were seeing in adult romantic relationships were based on the fact that they have not been giving these skills that we were teaching the kids now in school. And, I never learned this. I'm sure you probably never learned this because none of us were actually given these tools. And that's where often we get stuck thinking there's an issue with the relationship or with our partner, which is simply just a lack of having the right skill set to understand and see the patterns and dynamics playing out.
So true. I love that you were teaching kids and all of that, because if we teach with the kids, it makes it so our adult relationships are so much easier and we understand them on a different level. And you're right. We definitely have to seek out the tools and be willing to, in a sense, kind of, I guess, humble ourselves that we don't know everything, because people can often find like, well, everyone has a relationship, so what are you going to do to help me? But it really is, like you said, Thomas, these simple tools that if we apply them to our relationships, magic can happen.
Yeah, and even, very, very simple concepts like understanding how our brain is a storytelling organ. And as humans, we basically understand the world through stories. And that means we make meaning by creating stories about what happened to us. And that's important to know, because when we know the stories that we form, we can also understand that everything that we experience, we are going to interpret through those stories. And through that, we can start questioning what it is we believe that's happening. So if something happens to me that my partner is doing that suddenly makes me feel really upset, I can start looking at, but what is the story that I'm creating around this? Okay, she was late for our date. So I said to myself, she doesn't care, and that's why I got angry. But the truth is, I don't really know whether she cares or not. That's just my story. And it's probably coming from a place of having felt in the past that people did not take me seriously or whatever, were late, and that they didn't care. So now that's my automatic interpretation. And just by questioning this, we can realize and understand that when we lack information, our brain will automatically fill out these gaps with our old stories. So even being able to just say, actually, I don't know if she doesn't respect me. That's just my presumption. Why don't I ask her? And again, just doing that alone start making us be able to paint a different story, because now we can get more facts and actually create a story probably more likely with what happened rather than our old interpretation.
I love that. So, speaking of stories, we often have our own personality, or perhaps we'll go with character that we're showing up in our relationships. And this kind of leads me to the 5 love languages, because when we know these, it can really, and we apply it, it can definitely help the other person feel seen and loved. So, can you talk about what are the 5 love languages and why are they even important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And the whole concept of the love languages was a guy called Gary Chapman. He's actually written a really famous book about it. And it's very, very simple at its core. And essentially, I think as we grow up, we obviously have different caregivers. It might be a parent or whoever it is that took care of you, that showed us different ways that we were valued and that made us feel loved. And we all have the need to feel that we belong and that we're valued, because it makes us feel safe. And it could be that you had a dad who went on business trips, and when he came home, he would bring a gift. So you learned that getting gifts meant that you were valued and that you were loved. It could be you had a mom that always read stories with you in the evening and cuddled you, so your love language is touch. And we have specific ways that are more likely to make us feel loved. And I think Gary Chapman, he called it the love bucket, if I'm right. And basically he says it's a way we need to keep that love bucket full. And when we do, the relationship flourish much better. And we can even ask our partner, how full is your love bucket? And they can say from 0 to 10. And then we kind of know, okay, do we have to give them some of their love language to fill that up? I use a different expression. I use the analogy of an emotional bank account, where you
Mm.
can say every time we have an argument, we withdraw money out of the bank account. And every time we do something that's good and give our partner their love language, we make an investment, we put money into the bank account. And of course, if we keep drawing out, emotional money, or whatever we call it, from the bank account, eventually we can't pay it back and we're going to go bankrupt. And that's what often happens in relationships with year after year, when people haven't, gotten their love language. And you also ask, why is it important? I think the reason it's important it's obviously because we can make our partner feel more loved, but also it can create an enormous frustration. If, let's say that we often give the love language that is our love language. So for me, it's touch. So it could be that I kept, giving my partner a massage, but actually that's not what they value at all. They don't actually enjoy massage or touch very much. Actually, their love language is word of affirmation. They like to be told how great they are, what they're doing, how I appreciate different things about them. So I could keep putting in a lot of effort giving my partner a massage every evening, and yet she feels frustrated, and we both get frustrated, not really knowing why, because I feel, oh, I'm doing so much for you, and yet she's not really feeling happy. And this simple understanding of these love languages makes us be able to give our partner what it is that they need. And to make it really quick, what the 5 love languages are is the first one is touch, physical touch. And the next one is quality time. And it's important, the word quality, because all time is not equal. Quality time means you give your partner dedicated attention. You put your phone away, your laptop, etc., and you just focus on them. The third one is word of affirmation, which we just mentioned, which is essentially getting praise, or verbal appreciation. And the fourth one is gifts. And we mentioned that too. So getting something. And again, I just want to mention, because often there's a bit of stigmatism or shame around having gift as a love language, because people will say that's superficial. And I just want to put it into an evolutionary perspective, because it isn't superficial at all. Gifts is a way of people sharing resources. And when somebody shares resources with us, it shows that we are valuable to them. So actually, biologically, it makes a lot of sense that gifts makes us feel appreciated and loved. So again, I just want to take away that stigmatism that it's wrong to have gifts as your love language. It's not. And the last one is acts of service, which is obviously somebody doing something for you that's meaningful. And I would even say with these love languages, they sound very generic, and it's important to know specifically what your partner likes. So be specific, ask them down to details. So they might say, my love language is touch, but that can be very different. For me, I like a shoulder massage. I don't necessarily like a foot massage. It might be different for you. Quality time for you will look very different than quality time for me. So it's really important to, ask your partner experiences they had where they felt really appreciated and loved, and get them to describe that, and then get an understanding for what their love language really is.
I love that. And your explanation is so fantastic when it talks about the 5 love languages. And I also love that you talk about the emotional bank account. That's one of the things that I like to use with my clients as well. And I'll encourage them to each pick, share with each other what specifically 3 really great deposits are and 3 really big withdrawals are, so that people know. And then I'm like, hang it on your fridge or hang it on your mirror, so you're very aware of it until it just becomes a habit ingrained in you, that you reduce the amount of withdrawals and you add in as many of those deposits as you can. Because as you're saying, these are such simple concepts, but they're so powerful when you use them in your relationship, because really we all just want to know that we're loved and accepted, especially in our intimate relationships.
Yeah, and I like how you said put it on the fridge, because I think it's so important to have a reminder. Often, as we get into the the comfort zone where we're very familiar with each other, it's so easy to get complacent. And again, it's human nature. It's not because we're bad people, but then we start putting our resources and focus on other things, and we often forget the things that are important to maintain our partner. And I think it's just important to remember that everything worth having in life requires continuous effort, whether it's running a business, whether it's your relationship. So I like that idea you said of having that reminder of the fridge or wherever it is. So people just remember, oh yeah, these are the things I can do for my partner to really make them feel special.
Yes, and I love that, the continuous effort, because so often people can think that relationships, like, it should just be easy. If you're a good fit, you should just know, it should just work. But really, all of those relationships that look so easy are actually putting in the work. They're doing these things to make sure their relationship is nourished. Or I love how you call it the love pocket. So I'm wondering if the books are different in the UK versus the US, because here it's the love tank. And he
Ah,
very
really?
much, yeah, the love tank. And so he very much talks about, Gary, in his book, about how if we do not do these love languages, if we do not honor and respect our partner's love language, their love tank will never be as full as it could be. And so I love how you explained it. And also, I really appreciate you just mentioning that wanting gifts is not something to be ashamed about, or it's not like a shallow love language to feel really loved and special and, seen and noticed when you get a gift from somebody, if that's how you feel loved, that's 100% okay. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I have so many clients who gifts are their love language.
Yeah, and I just found people very often feel ashamed of that or have some stigmatism because they feel we have this idea and say it's superficial. And I just think it's important to understand the evolutionary perspective and see it's not at all superficial. It's completely normal and healthy and a beautiful need to have.
Yes, I love that, Thomas. Okay, so we've kind of talked about set the foundation, right? So the love languages really help you create your foundation of your relationship and keep that healthy. So I want to talk about, especially after you've been in a relationship for a little while, it can be challenging to, you know, really make sure that your relationship stays intimate and that, the love's continuing. So I know you have 3 steps to intimacy and love. Could you share those with us?
Yeah, of course I can. And I think first I want to say, and I blame this on Hollywood, by the way, I really created a false image of what intimacy and love is.
Mm.
Because, we always see these movies and people fall in love and it's beautiful and great. And we have all experienced a beautiful honeymoon phase. And again, what we have to understand is when we're in that phase, it's a bit neurochemically, it's the same as having an addiction, essentially, meaning we only see the good parts of that character and we don't notice all the other parts. And as we slowly get to know each other, those chemicals will settle. It take anything from 3 months to 2 years, this honeymoon phase. And after that stage, there's 2 different things that can happen. People think, oh, we are not in love, we don't love each other anymore, and they leave each other, which is a very Western way of looking at love. And then there's the other way, which is where we grow it into a mature love, and that requires effort and also knowledge and understanding, which is what we'll try and give today. And the truth is that in any relationship, there will come a point where the natural fluctuation of hormones will drop and you won't feel the same way. But that can then grow into a much more deep, intimate, profound love. And that's where you're right. I have 3 steps that I think are absolutely important. And I try to compare to, so people can have like a visual image to a plant. I always say, if you have a plant, it needs soil, it needs water, and it needs sun to grow and flourish. And for love and intimacy to grow and flourish, it needs safety, it needs vulnerability, and it needs to be met with acceptance. And these are the 3 very simple steps to create a sustainable long-term love in a relationship. And Brené Brown, and I will recommend people go check out her books, and also she's done a TED Talk. She's a researcher on vulnerability. And, we all have this fundamental need to be seen and accepted. And even though we're adults, this still stays with us from we're born till we go to the grave. As little children, what we want most is to be seen and feel that we are accepted. And yet we have so much shame. We so often learn that that's not okay. This need is not, we should act in certain ways to be accepted by parents, by other people. So we hide these things away that we don't feel are acceptable. And there's nothing more intimate than being able to have an experience of somebody who can see these parts of us and meet them with acceptance, which is what we always desired. And there's a profound intimacy and healing that happens in that space. I call it being emotionally naked, because we're all familiar with, the being physical naked when we have, sexual contact with somebody else. But we rarely talk about becoming emotional naked, and there's a completely different intimacy that happens there. And even in a sexual context, being able to start being vulnerable, sharing your fantasies, and having someone who can accept them, which doesn't mean, by the way, that they always give you what you want. There's a big difference between acceptance and having to give your partner that. And just knowing that can take away some fear of showing acceptance. And there's such a beautiful, beautiful space that will create an enormous intimacy, both sexually and emotionally, between a couple. And it's something where you can ongoing, because we will all have vulnerabilities and they come up constantly. And I think the real question for many people is, yes, but how do I know it's safe? That's what people always ask me, because the reason I'm not vulnerable is because I'm afraid of being judged. And of course we are. Again, we are tribal animals. So being judged is really, really painful, and even more so by our partner. So there are ways and some steps that, I put down for how we can start learning to see, is this a safe partner to share with them? What I always say is you can start writing down for yourself, what are some things that you feel vulnerable about, and then maybe rate them from 1 to 10, 10 being like something really, really vulnerable that would be devastating to feel rejected, and 1, something that's a little bit vulnerable, but not that bad. So start sharing small vulnerabilities when you meet a new partner or with your current partner, and see how they respond. Do they respond with judgment? Then yeah, maybe it's not that safe. Maybe you need to sit and talk with them and teach them about my material. And if they instead show you acceptance, and yeah, beautiful, then you can share another vulnerability that's maybe a bit more exposed for you. And also notice, do they judge other people? Are they quite acceptance when they talk about other people? That's also a good sign. And the third one is, do they meet you with their own vulnerability? Are they able to do that? Because that also shows that it's more safe if they can do the same. Um, and I think in every moment, I always say we have a choice whether we open up like a flower or whether we close. It's a choice we make in every single moment that determine how the relationship goes. And with my ex-partner, I remember very early when we were, I think we've been on 3 or 4 dates. And I already said to her then, I said to her, I would really love to know whether we're dating exclusively or not. And for many people, that would be considered an insecure question. So most people wouldn't dare to do it. It would feel too vulnerable because they would feel, oh, I shouldn't show that, I'm thinking or care about that. But for me, I didn't see it as insecurity. I have the self-awareness to know I like clarity, and I was okay with both scenarios, but I know that my need for safety means I need clarity and know what's going on. And I said that to her, and she met me very beautifully and said, yeah, this is what I want. And, if that fits with you, let's continue to date. And it was just a really beautiful, open conversation that made us feel more connected. And she always said that set the framework for us to be vulnerable throughout the relationship. So always remember that you have a choice, because we really do. And we choose every moment that we interact with other people, how we show up. And I think the last part to mention is the point of acceptance. And again, often when people are not able to give us acceptance, or if you struggle being accepted towards your partner, it's come down to that we feel fearful. Because when we're judgmental, it's really because we're fearful. And there's many reasons that we might feel fearful. We might feel that we can't give what it is our partner want. And just remind yourself, you don't have to give it to them. Acceptance is not the same as giving it to them. And also the fact that, we can put in an effort to try and understand other people's world, even if we don't agree with them. Just understanding it can be really, really important. And I know for me, when I was young, I read a book by somebody called Nancy Friday, a book called My Secret Garden, which was basically the first book written about female fantasies. And that really opened up my mind and took away a lot of the judgment I had around female sexuality. So again, educate yourself, go speak to different people, then you read books about things you might not understand. And the more you understand it, the less fearful you become, because it's not different, it's not unknown. And that means it becomes much easier to be acceptant of that.
Oh my gosh, Thomas, that was amazing. I loved everything you said there. And I think, oh my gosh, just so many solid points. The emotionally naked, the vulnerability list. Like, what a great idea to just start off with, like, sharing small vulnerabilities and then building up as you are realizing that the safety is in your relationship. Or what would you do if you noticed that it wasn't feeling safe? Would you stop being vulnerable? I mean, I know you said like you would, like, maybe you need to educate them on that, but what if like it continues to feel like this isn't a relationship where I can be vulnerable? What do you do if even you're trying to share the tools, but they're just not willing or ready to start applying them themselves? What do you do in a relationship when that's happening?
That's a great question. And I think what I always say to people is it's important, and this is, I've done this and I recommend everybody do this, is to write down things that for you are deal breakers and non-deal breakers. So deal breakers are things that you must have in a relationship for this to be a place where you want to be. And non-deal breakers are things that you prefer, but it would be okay. So for a deal breaker could be somebody wanted an open relationship versus someone that doesn't. It could be somebody wanted another child and somebody wasn't. This could be a deal breaker. For me, this is a deal breaker. If somebody can't meet me in vulnerability, it's not a relationship I would want to be in. So it's of course up to the individual to decide how important it is to them to live in this way. For me, intimacy is hugely important. So, what I would do first, I would understand that anything new to a partner can feel threatening. And again, especially for a man, we grow up in this culture that we should know everything as men, and we don't like that we have to learn things or told that we don't know. So it can often hit a man's ego to be told that he needs to learn about relationship. And I know a lot of men will be very resistant. It's often women that, seek out some of these things and tools. So I think it's being really gentle and also making sure that they know that they're loved, and this is not about them not being good enough. It's just about learning something together, and make it something that's exciting, make it fun. Say, don't make it about that they have faults. If you go in there and say, you know what, we're not connecting enough, I don't feel connected, then they feel blamed and they will shut down. That's not the way to get people to go on a journey with you. Instead, say, I got this really exciting opportunity for us to connect even more and make our relationships even better and have more fun, etc. That's much more likely to get them to come along with you and at least try and explore. And you can start showing them in your actions. And you said, what if they can't meet you, if they keep being judgmental? It's true. Then you need to sit down and talk to them and say, this is really important for me. And if they still won't come on board, then you have to decide whether this is a deal breaker or not. Of course, I can't say that because it's individual from person to person.
No, that's such a great example. And actually, like, I can even share from my own relationship. So with my husband now, I think when we were engaged, I was trying to get him to communicate more with me and be more vulnerable. And he was a little bit resistant. And exactly, I did as you said, Thomas. I said, I really need this to be in our relationship, or I just won't be able to marry you, because I cannot have a marriage where we cannot communicate and where we cannot be vulnerable and just be ourselves and share honestly what's on our heart and mind. And whether it's our dreams or whether it's our frustrations, I need to be able to do that. And he was like, whoa, I didn't know it was that serious. And I was like, it is that serious. I need that. And he was like, okay. So then he completely got on board with me and started sharing more, and our communication leveled up, and it just completely shifted our relationship. However, I didn't go at him, as you said, like, my word choice was really important, and how I approached him with like gentleness and with a place from love, and like, this is an opportunity for us to grow, or and I didn't want it to feel like an ultimatum, like, oh, you better learn how to do this or else I'm out of here. But it was like, I love you so much. However, I won't be able to have a fulfilling marriage if we can't talk to each other. So,
Yeah, I really like the way you did that. And also, I would say that remember that for many men, this is like learning a new language. So, and this is very much driven by our culture. Again, the way we see that we raise, women and men are quite different. So a lot of men are stigmatized and shamed very early about showing emotions. One of the main emotions that I encourage in men are anger, but showing more sensitive emotions are not. And that often makes us feel weak when we do, because we were categorized, labeled, ridiculed. So a lot of men have shut that down in their childhood very, very early and never expressed that. So they simply haven't learned to sense, to feel, to put words to it. So it's literally like a new language, while a lot of women have expressed different emotions much more freely with their girlfriends, etc., growing up, meaning that they have developed this language. So I would just say also have a bit of patience and understand that it could take him a little time to be able to learn how to do that, and also feel safe, because it might be even more scary for him to do so.
right. No, that's such a solid point, Thomas. And I think for women, it's okay. So, as you're having the patience for your partner, your male partner, to learn this new language, it's also like you're learning a new language as well, because you're learning a new way to approach someone who's never had the opportunity to really dive into their vulnerability or their emotions, or have a relationship where that was safe to do so. So it's like, I love how you're talking, like, the word choice that you're using as I'm listening to you, Thomas, is like such a great example. So I'm sure sometimes when you're working with someone, you'll get like, okay, well, maybe have you tried saying this or something? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I said that. And I'm like, but did you use these words? Because if you use it, like, word choice really actually matters when it comes to, as you said, bringing up some of these topics and our tone and all of that. So for women, maybe that's the part where you're learning, and where you have to also have patience for yourself, is like coming up with new ways. Like you said, instead of saying, I'm not feeling like we're connecting enough, you say, we have this exciting opportunity to really grow our connection. That's a completely different vibe, but it's also a completely new way of speaking as well. And so I think for women, it can definitely be an opportunity for you to also realize that you're learning a new way to bridge this connection with your partner.
Yeah, and like we said in the beginning, that's the beauty of relationship, is we're constantly learning, and there's literally no better place to learn and to heal than in our relationships. Our relationship have the capacity to heal us in a way a therapist cannot, because they can give us that intimacy, vulnerability, and acceptance that can only happen in an intimate relationship, and give us that sense of safety if we didn't have that growing up. So yeah, and again, we learn so much about ourselves because we get reflections from our partner and our reactions. So it's just a constantly beautiful place to grow and learn from.
I love that. Okay, so I saw a post the other day. Someone wrote a question. It was like a younger, like 21, 22-year-old female. She wrote, do you think that relationships are ending or they don't last as long now because we're marrying for love versus like a business exchange or an arranged marriage? And so this kind of leads me to asking you about expectations that, so when we come to our relationship satisfaction, what does expectations, like what part do they
Yeah,
play?
it's a really good question. And again, I blame it on Hollywood. Everything blame on Hollywood. I just
That's
think,
right.
again, we have just really created this completely unrealistic expectation around relationships. And again, I want to go back to first when we were children, because think about when you were a child, you would get your safety if you had a functional, good upbringing. You would get safety from your caregivers, whether that were your parents, whoever they were. When you felt unsafe, you would go to them, they would comfort you, cuddle you, etc. They would support you. And that's where you felt safe. That's where you felt comfortable. That was what was known. When you wanted excitement, you would go out with your friends and explore and go play and go do new experiences. And that was the newness, the adventureness. And again, then suddenly when we grow up, we want both these, but we want them in one person, even though they live on opposite side of the spectrum, because safety and familiar is actually counterproductive to what is exciting for us, what's exhilarating, because that's what's new and unfamiliar. And therefore, that doesn't mean, I'm not saying we can't have both in a relationship. I'm just saying we need to adjust our expectations, because it requires a conscious effort to do this. And one way we can do is we can constantly check in and again see, how am I feeling? Maybe I'm having a lot of excitement, but actually I'm starting to feel a bit uncertain and not feel fully safe. Then I need safety. Then that's what's out of balance, and we need to create a bit of safety again, familiarity. Or maybe we're so familiar, we're so bored, and then then we've gone too far over here, and we have to create a bit of unfamiliarity, a bit of newness, etc. So you can constantly be with your partner and talk about where you are on the spectrum, to understand what is it we need to add into the relationship to get right back in the middle where we're in a balanced place. And also, again, I like to look at evolution, because I think it gives us a good understanding of why these expectations are unrealistic. We used to live in small tribes. It's only in modern day that we live in houses isolated. And now what we used to get from a whole tribe, we expect to get from one person. They have to be our best friend. They have to be a soulmate, financial support, emotional support, share interests, raise the kids, do housework, make us laugh, keep us safe, emotionally bond, give us physical touch, safe, both safety and excitement. So you can see it's just all these expectations that used to be a village that would come together to give you. We now expect of one person, and we are so dependent on that one attachment today. And I think one thing I always say to people is also to learn to understand how to spread your needs out onto multiple people, rather than expect your partner to be all of it. Just like we have different friends, you have a friend that you laugh more with, that's more funny. You have a friend that you have more intimate conversation with, etc., etc. You might have a friend who give you a massage. So you get different needs from different people. And similar here, it's really important to have a different support system. So your partner is not meant to give you all of this. They might not share all your interests, and that's okay. Find other people that you can do some of that with. They might not be that funny. That doesn't mean it's not a great relationship. Find other people who can give you that outlay. So again, yeah, it's about adjusting, I think, the expectation, and also learning how to deal with disappointment, because it's inherited. And this is where we have this romantic idea that it should all be lovey-dovey. Nothing is. Any relationship is bound to have disappointment, because we're two different people coming with different expectations, different backgrounds, different needs, different histories, different upbringings. Of course, it's going to clash. And of course, we can't meet all each other's needs. It's just impossible. So I think what we need to do to remain in intimacy is learning how to deal with disappointment. And most often people try to avoid disappointment, and that doesn't leave them in a very good place, because it means they start trying to they don't listen to their own boundaries, because they don't want to have disappointment. So they let their boundaries be overstepped, which create resentment, or they try to accommodate needs they don't really want to, or they don't express their own needs. Instead, embrace that disappointment is actually a beautiful place for connection. And here's the two different ways. One creates disconnect, the other one creates connection. So if we have a moment of disappointment and I just leave my partner on their own to deal with that disappointment and say, that's your problem. I don't, do you want this? I don't want to give it to you. That will create disconnect because they feel abandoned. They feel alone. They feel you don't care. If instead I sit down and have eye contact with my partner and I listen to what they want and I hear their disappointment and I recognize that and I play that back and say, I can really hear how disappointed that is to you. And I understand it sucks to not get, what we need. And I really wish I could give this to you, but I can't without violating my own boundary. And I don't want to do that. But I can really be here with you in that disappointment. And I'll say, how can I support you in feeling? And sometimes if something is a big disappointment, you will have to listen to your partner multiple times, bring up that disappointment. And each time, if you can sit with them and not make it about you, because it's nothing to do with anything being wrong with you. It's just that now, inheritively, we are all disappointing each other. And if you can be with them and support them and be in that space and hold them, then it can actually make you feel closer together, even though they don't get that need that they wanted, but they get another more important need, which is a partner who's there to listen to them, to support them and hold them.
Oh, Thomas. Oh my gosh, I love everything you're saying. And you're like, it's so funny too, as you're talking, if I write down like a little note to add to, then you like say it in your next sentence. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. So I love everything you're saying. And I think it's so, so, so important because if we want to be able to be vulnerable and to express ourselves in that safety, this is all making so much sense because I know so many relationships where when they feel disappointed or when they're trying to share with somebody that something was disappointing to them or hurtful, the other person will think that means like that they're a bad person. And I love how you're saying, no, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just you're two humans in a relationship trying to navigate this journey together. And what will hurt one won't necessarily hurt the other. And that doesn't make one of them wrong or the other one right. It's just having a space to be able to express yourself and show up as you are. I think that is so important. And I also love how you talked about, your partner isn't meant to fill every role in your life. And I think that's why that is so important, as you mentioned with our friendships, that we keep them alive when we get into a relationship so that we can take the pressure off of our partner. And so we can still have the person that, I don't know, enjoys, like I have, like my husband doesn't really enjoy doing yoga with me, but I have a friend who loves doing yoga with me. So, I do yoga with her and it's always a great time, and that's okay. And I love that you're just putting that out there. You're normalizing that for people and helping people understand like, hey, take the pressure off each other. Just be what you are in your relationship and know that you can have friendships that fill those other roles and it doesn't make your relationship wrong.
No, if anything, it just makes it normal and what biologically how we're supposed to function. Because it's not normal the way we live today, that we don't have this tribal support system. So I always say to people, start creating that. And I remember in past relationship many years ago when one of my partners, she would get really upset with me because I would go out with my friends and she didn't really have her own friends, and that would make her jealous. And I started then going out less, and then I got upset, and it created this toxic dynamic. Um, and it was because her dependency had become on me to fulfill all her needs. And I, at that point, weren't aware of this and thought it was my job to fulfill all her needs. And then we both start compromising and it created a toxic dynamic. So it's so important to be able to, just accept that we are not supposed to fulfill all our needs. But what we should be able to do for our partner, or I don't like the word should, but would be wonderful if we can, is to be able to give them the acceptance of all their needs and know that all their needs are welcome and okay. And I even remember when my partner shared a sexual fantasy with me that I couldn't fulfill because it would have crossed my boundaries of what I was comfortable with. But what I could give her was the acceptance and celebration of the beauty of her fantasy. And instead, I told it to her as a naughty story instead of playing it out in real life, which worked great. And it made her feel, again, intimate with me because she was able to share it and get that acceptance and that we could play with it in a different way. But I didn't feel inadequate because I know it's not my job to be able to fulfill all her needs. What I want to be able to give her is the acceptance of all her needs and show her that all of them are beautiful, whether I can give them to her in real life or not.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I love the creativity in that. And so one of the main themes you're talking a lot about is like that safety, like you said, the 3 steps, right? Safety, vulnerability, and acceptance. Can you tell us a little bit more about the safety element of the 3 steps?
Yeah, I think this is so important. I think without safety, nothing we talked about will work. People often come in talking about issues with sex, communication, raising kids, and other stuff. But really, the underlying issue for most conflicts in relationships are an issue with safety. And I say nothing will work. No communication skill will work if the two people don't feel safe. It's like building a house on a hill that's known to have earthquake and mudslides. You might build the most beautiful house, but eventually it's going to come crumbling down. So
Mm,
find a good foundation before you start building the house in the first place. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And safety at its very essence is being responsive to each other and trusting that the other will be there for you when you need them and they won't leave you. And this is why the one thing when people say, what's a one thing and no go you must never do in your relationship? I always say, never threaten the relationship. When you start threatening the relationship, there will start being cracks in the wall and the foundation will start becoming unsettled. And it's very difficult to fix those cracks. You might have to rebuild whole parts of the house. So
mm,
never threaten a relationship. No matter how upset you get, do not threaten that you're going to abandon or leave your partner. So I think that's really key. And also to understand in the safety is that we grow up with different, it's called attachment styles, attachment theory, and they're quite, I'll go over them quickly because I think they're important to understand, because we have different ways, again, when we grow up with our caregivers, that makes us feel safe in different ways. And the first one is called anxious attachment. And essentially, we have inconsistent caregivers that was there, then they suddenly weren't there, or maybe one of our caregivers abandoned us and just left. Then we might start feeling worried in our adult relationship that our partner will leave us. And often these people, again, and this is where I don't like the shame and categories we put on people, we call these people needy, but they are actually not needy. It's very misunderstood to call them needy. They simply had wounds from their childhood where, you know, they felt basically abandoned and therefore they were worried about their partner abandoning them. And all they need is more reassurance. And actually, there can be a lot of healing in relationships when we can give them that so they start feeling more securely attached. And attachment styles have been shown to be able to adapt. Over 2 years or more, the neurological wiring actually changes, and somebody who's anxious can start feeling secure if their partner is able to give them that. So rather than attack them and saying, oh, don't be needy, or, you know, try and categorize them, if you could understand that they're not needy, it comes from a wound that they have, and if we can heal that wound, they will feel secured like everybody else. And the next part is the next attachment style is called avoidant. And that's often if a child learned that they basically had to care for themselves, nobody would really be there for their needs. Maybe they had to grow up and be an adult too quickly. And often they need to have space, and they will often be seen as fearing intimacy. And often it's because they simply don't trust that other people will be there for their needs. And therefore, they have learned to go off and take care of themselves. So when they're stressed, they often want time alone and they often will retrieve, etc. And the interesting thing is, these people are often perceived externally as being the confident people. But the interesting thing that science found was, you know, who had the highest level of anxiety when it was measured? It was the people that were avoidant. It was the people that were seen as being very confident and not caring. They actually felt more anxiousness because they don't trust that anybody will be there. So internally, they had a very high stress response and adrenaline and cortisol floating around their body. And this is quite interesting to see. These categories we given people often don't actually match with reality. And often they simply need some space. And why these attachment styles are important are because dynamics play out in relationships. So I'll give you an example. If you have someone who's anxious, so they need reassurance, and somebody who's avoidant who want to retrieve, it can quickly seem to become a toxic dynamic because the anxious partner will reach out to get that validation or safety that they need. The avoidant will feel controlled and they will then retrieve even more, which will make the anxious person even more anxious and try and get even more that validation. And they basically reinforce each other. So avoidant retrieve more and more, the anxious get more and more anxious and nervous and jealous, etc. And if you're not aware of these patterns, you can't stop them. If you can see it and you're able to see, oh, my partner is simply anxiously attached and she just needs to feel reassurance, then I can ask her, what would make you feel safe when I go out with my friends? And she might say, oh, I would love if you could just send me a text message and check in with me. And then I'm like, okay, that's great. That's very simple. And then I know her need, and I can, give her that to a certain degree, accommodate as much as possible, so she start feeling safe. Same, if you know that your partner is just avoidant, it doesn't mean they don't want intimacy. It means when they're stressed, they deal with it. They need to go away and deal with it themselves. Then okay, I just need to give him a little space, and you just give him that space. That way, we don't get stuck in these toxic dynamics. And like I said, I think it's important to just remember attachment styles are not fixed. So don't use this to label your partner and go see, oh, you're anxious, blah, 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 or you are avoidant. This is not going to work. You can together form what's called a secure attachment bond if you know how to help regulate each other. And that's what I think is just really important to bring up. And there's different ways that you can help. It's called co-regulation, regulate each other's nervous system. One thing is you can create rituals. So I always say, when you come home, have a ritual where whatever you're doing, just stop for 1 minute, 2 minutes, give each other a hug and give each other eye contact. And I know a lot of people maybe have kids and they say, we're too busy. You should never be too busy for this, because trust me, it will benefit your kids so much if you two stay in connection. You will be so much better parents. Make sure you have eye contact, make sure you have physical contact, make sure you make time, even if it's 5-10 minutes, to sit down and give each other dedicated attention at the end and share what happened throughout your day. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it helps regulate your partner. And for you to have a functional relationship, you have to help co-regulate each other's nervous system.
Mm. Wow, Thomas, that is so helpful. I bet you so many people are having like aha moments and they're seeing this dynamic play out in their relationship. And I love that you mentioned the secure attachment and that you can create that within your relationship, regardless of any other attachment you had in your life. I wanted to ask you a question, because I know this happens a lot. So I know you said never threaten the relationship, but what happens if you have threatened your relationship, or your partner has threatened your relationship, or if you found yourself in one of those yo-yo type relationships, like whenever a really big conflict happens, you break up, and then like 2 days later or the next day, you're like, oopsie, just kidding, let's get back together. And then that's the pattern that's developed, is that you break up every time it gets heated. And so obviously you're not feeling safe in that relationship, right? Because that security has been broken, because you know that they could leave as soon as they get upset with you. So what would
That's
you do
right.
in that relationship to kind of, I don't know, start healing that and approaching it differently?
That's a really good question. And I think what is required is to sit down together and have a healing conversation. And these tools, again, are very simple and hugely effective. I did it a couple of years ago with my parents, who I had a strained relationship with. And I actually gave them my book, and they read through it, and they saw the healing process exercise, and we sat and did it together. And it basically healed 20 years of misunderstanding, to just sit down for half an hour, and we all cried and we all let go. And again, it comes back to this thing that we all really want to be heard. So if one person has been hurt and damaged, and again, I was going to talk about this a bit later, but we'll do it now. If one person has been hurt, it's really important that they get acknowledgement. And if you could both sit down, again, really important, when you do this, never do these conversations when you're driving. Why? Because when you can't see and look directly at somebody, when you can only see them in your peripheral vision, we know that our adrenaline gland, basically our fear response, is more likely to get triggered. It's just how we are wired as humans, to perceive more threat when we can't see people, meaning you're more likely to get re-triggered and get into an argument. So never do this when you're driving or can't sit. Sit a time where you have uninterrupted time, can sit and look at each other and have eye contact. Let the person who feel they've been hurt or violated express how they feel and what happened for them. They should try to do it without blame language. So rather than saying, you did this to me and blah, 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 say, how did it make you feel? It could be, when you said the relationship was over, it made me feel really, really scared. And I went up and I was just sitting for hours feeling completely baffled and didn't know what to do with myself. And I just don't feel safe. I feel really hard opening up to you because I don't trust that you're going to stay with me. That's a vulnerable way of saying it, and there's no blame. And again, because I'm not blaming, they're more likely to be able to hear me. And what then would be needed from the partner is to be able to recognize and again accept what is being said and also validate that. They don't have to agree. And there's a big difference between, again, acceptance and agreement, but they have to accept it and validate it. So they could then say, okay, I hear that that was really painful for you, or whatever it was they said when you felt that when I said I was going to leave, and that made you feel really baffled, and that you had to sit for hours and be in pain. And the next step is for them to then take responsibility for what they've done, and they could then say, yeah. And again, don't fake it. So again, but if you're able to feel empathy with your partner, like I said, even if you don't agree, you can probably understand that it's not nice for them to be in pain. So you can acknowledge that, and you could say, I'm really sorry that what I did caused you pain. And it's possible to say that even if we don't think that we did the things they said, because we can still understand that we don't want to cause them pain. If we love our partner, we don't. So I could say, I really didn't want you to feel in that way, and I'm really sorry. And you need to acknowledge that. And the last part is, you need to show what you're going to do to change, because otherwise there can be no trust. If they can't trust that something will change in your behavior, of course the same pattern will repeat. And you said, what if somebody do it again and again? And that's right. If somebody keep doing that, then eventually there will be no trust, and there will be no safety, and it can't be restored anymore. So the fact is, then that partner have to take responsibility and say, okay, here's what I will do next time. I will work on being able to learn how to manage when I get angry and triggered. Maybe I will go for a walk, and maybe they agree, if I get triggered, I put up my hand and then you tell me to go for a walk, and they do that. But something have to be acknowledged, that they will do some change in their behavior, so the partner can trust that this will not happen again and again, and they then have to follow through. And that's how trust is then slowly rebuilt. And unless this is done, like you said, if one party keeps threatening the relationship, yeah, then at some point you simply can't restore trust anymore, and yeah, you will not be able to have that kind of relationship.
Mm. Yes, thank you. Thank you for going through like how we can handle conflict in a different way or approach conflict differently. And I would encourage everyone to use those tools that you said when it comes to conflict, because it can shift how, it's not that couples disagree or have arguments that's, detrimental to the relationship. It's how you have the arguments and how you repair them and how you come back together. So I love the tips that you're doing, and how you even used it in your own life and saw it heal the relationship with your parents. That's incredible.
Yeah, and this is what I think is important to remember, that even though we talk about this in a romantic context, these tools work with everyone. I have so intimate relationships now with all my friends, even my male friends, because I've been able to start applying this and even helping them become more vulnerable. And it has created a much more intimate experience for me in all my relationships, not just romantically. So I think it's important to just remember that.
Yes, I love that. That is so true, that these tools are used in every relationship, including with yourself. Like, imagine if you make a mistake and if you handled yourself, just you expressed how you felt without blaming or criticizing yourself, that would feel so different than beating yourself up for making a mistake, right? So
I
I
love that
think,
point.
yeah, these are fantastic. Okay, so I want to ask you, why are some moments more important than others in a relationship?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think often what can happen in some relationships that I've seen is that they come in and they say, we're really good. We have the same hobbies. We have a lot of fun, and the relationship is good. And yet something just doesn't seem right. My wife, she seemed to be retrieving, and she's not really sharing much with me. And yeah, it just doesn't feel the same anymore. And often what could have happened is what I call key moments. So not all moments in a relationship is equal, because they are, again, what I call key attachment moments, which could be the birth of a child, a graduation, somebody being fired from their job, or somebody being diagnosed with a sickness. Big, important moments where we feel really emotionally vulnerable, and where we really need our partner to be there for us, to support us. And if they're not there in that moment, then it breaks a trust. And these moments really are black and white. They really are. In our emotional brain, they're black and white. There's no, oh, I was stuck at work, so I couldn't come when you were in hospital and got diagnosed with cancer. There is none. Trust is broken if the partner is not there in these key moments. And again, you know, what you can do is what we talked about before: sit and have a repair conversation and talk about the pain that happened from the partner, acknowledge that pain, accept responsibility, and say how you're going to change in the future. So it's the same framework, but it's just important to recognize and then be able to sit down if something doesn't feel right, and look at where there's some really important moment in your relationship where your partner really needed support, where you simply weren't there, where they felt they were in danger or at threat or yeah, very emotionally exposed, and they really needed you to be there. And as I said, there could be a valid reason. It could be you simply couldn't get out of work, and it could be very valid. But again, you still have to acknowledge the pain that caused them. And until you do so, it can't start healing.
Yes, I think that is so important to acknowledge the pain that it caused them. I think that is such a sometimes overlooked step when it comes to the healing process, because when we are apologizing, we feel like some people can feel like, well, that means that I'm admitting that I'm a bad person or I messed up, and shame can come with that. So, do you have like a quick tip for somebody who has a hard time apologizing? Like, how can they reframe that in their mind?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways to see this. So again, often when people don't want to apologize, it's because they get stuck in logic and they have different interpretations of what happened. And I think number one, we have to remember that our memory, especially when we're under stressed and triggered, is very faulty. So neither of you are unlikely to remember events completely as they occurred, especially if you were triggered and angry. Again, we know this from neuroscience. So just remember that. And second of all, it doesn't really matter who is right, because what you're acknowledging is not necessarily a logical explanation of what happened. It's their emotional experience of what happened. And remember, their emotional experience is always true to them, just like your emotional experience is always true to you. So it doesn't really matter what happened logically. What you need to accept and acknowledge is the emotion that they felt from what happened, not what happened itself. And therefore, stop debating what happened and just focus on how it made your partner feel, and acknowledge that. And again, also remember what we talked about earlier is that we're all going to disappoint our partner. It doesn't mean we are bad people. You know, I disappointed my ex-wife when she gave birth to our second child, and I recognized that, and I have said that to her, and we had beautiful healing conversations about that. And there was reasons, but the reason doesn't really matter. We could debate that forever, it wouldn't heal. So I just acknowledged the emotions and how it felt for her, and that was enough for us to heal. And I know it doesn't make me a bad person, because I know I did the very best I could. And I know as a human being, I can't always fulfill other people's needs the way they want me to.
Yes, that is such a great, like, I love how you say it, because we can all understand it and it's very relatable, right? That we're getting stuck in the logic and we could debate the reasons, but that's not going to, influence any healing. So once we apologize and understand, and as you said, accept their emotional experience of what happened, and we, apologize for the pain that was caused, then that's when healing happens. That is such a great point, Thomas.
Yeah, and just accepting that people's emotional experience is always true. Whatever the facts, circumstances around what made that emotion happen might be seen differently, but their emotion is always very true, just like your emotions is true.
Yes, I love that. That's so important, because we really can't argue how someone's feeling. Like, we can try to, but it's, this is my experience in this situation. For some people, I like to give the example of, like, if you're sitting at a table, right? If you're sitting down to have dinner and people are all having that same meal, right? But if you were to have each individual person draw a picture of what that meal looked like, every single person would have a different drawing, even though they were all there. So it's the same. We can have different emotional experiences based on a situation. So I love that you're.
Yeah, and none of them are more true than the other. They're all true, and that's the beauty once we can just accept that.
Yes, I love that. Okay, let's talk about resentment. And why does resentment develop in a relationship, and how can we prevent that?
Yeah, it's such a big topic, but we will touch on it today. So I think there's a few different reasons. I think, first of all, resentment is one of the big killers of relationships. And I think, in my opinion, what I have experienced is that it's very often come from unexpressed needs or boundaries. And this is absolutely critical. And I think one thing that makes it very difficult for people to express their boundaries is, again, they don't want to disturb the pot. They don't want to create conflict, and they more prefer to have the peace. And often people have learned that their boundaries are not okay because they had to compromise them to be liked, etc. So, and they want to be liked more than, assert those boundaries. So I think one thing I really want to say is boundaries is the biggest gift that we can give to our partner. And you might say, why? For two reasons. Number one, it avoids resentment from building that eventually will deteriorate your relationship. So you're doing yourself a favor by honoring your boundaries, and you're doing your partner a favor because you're saving the relationship. But also because if you genuinely, and I hope you do, you have a partner that actually cares about you, then them knowing and trusting that you can set your boundaries allow them to be more free. You see, we can't trust our partner to set boundaries. We have to always tiptoe around them and what we do and what we try and what we say, because we don't know if we overstep their boundaries and hurt them. So when they know, because they have experience of you asserting your boundaries, they can trust you much more, and it makes them feel more free. Even imagine this in a sexual context, in a relationship. If your partner doesn't know if you let you do everything you want and just override your own boundaries, then they have to tiptoe, and they might be really afraid of trying new things. If they trust that you can just express your boundaries and say, actually, this doesn't feel good for me, let's skip this, then they are much more free to again explore and just express themselves, because they know you can take care of yourself. So you're giving your partner an enormous gift and your relationship by learning to assert your boundaries. And I think that's important to remember. And with needs as well, I think needs can't remain hidden. We can try, but eventually resentment will boil up. And again, it's so important to be able to express our needs, even if they can't be met. And I think part of this is, people often say, how do we do that? I think you can start looking at frustrations that you have on a frequent basis, because often they might reveal needs that are not being fulfilled. It could be you feel frustrated, you're not getting enough touch, or maybe you feel you're not getting enough attention. When you feel frustrated, start writing down what is going on and what is it actually that you're missing, and how can you communicate that in a clear need instead of in blame language. So I think being really aware, and also somatically, people often say, how do I know my boundaries? Because the truth is, very often, by the time we logically know a boundary has been violated, it has already been violated. And this is a beautiful practice I learned when I studied somatic therapy in San Francisco, was the fact that the first place that we feel when boundaries are violated, our stress response, is in our body. Somatically, we feel it instantly. So you can actually teach yourself to learn, and you can actually do exercises with people where on purpose they start doing things to push your boundaries, and you just sit and sense where in your body you feel it when they cross your boundary. Maybe they touch you a bit too intimately. Maybe they say feel where you sense it in your body. For me, it's a tension in my stomach, I realized. And that means that I know instantly when I feel that tension now in my stomach, that something had crossed my boundaries. Logically, I might not know yet what it was, but it's enough. And I can say, actually, let's stop this for a second. And they might say, why? I said, I don't know yet, but something just doesn't feel right. So learn to trust your sensation, because your stress response doesn't lie. And it might be that you have tense jaws. It might manifest differently for different people, but learn to know somatically how it feels when your boundaries are violated. That way you can make sure you stop the violation before it's too late and you start feeling angry or resentful.
Oh my gosh, that is such an incredible exercise to do to understand yourself. And oh my gosh, like that is so good. And I also love how you're saying you can say, I don't know yet, but something just doesn't feel right. So I'm going to honor that. And then you don't have to know the answers. You're just acknowledging and accepting what your body's telling you. Oh my goodness. I hope people will try that exercise and let you know how it goes, or even share with me how it goes. Like, let us know what comes up and what you're discovering as you apply some of these tools that Thomas has shared with us. Communicate with us what you decided to do in your relationship and you noticed is actually shifting it in a way that is better for you. I did want to ask you if you have any exciting projects coming up.
Yeah, so I guess things have been changing a bit because, of course, coronavirus had made things go online. But yes, there should be soon probably launching an online workshop that I'll be doing. It was supposed to be in person. That will run over 11 weeks. That will basically teach couples, or it could be singles, but it's mainly focused at couples, teach them all the fundamental skills over 11 weeks of how to create a flourishing relationship, and how to go through all these different steps. And it will be really, really practical and just jam-packed with practical things that people can do to go out there. And I think, like we talked about before, it requires two willing people, because again, we can only do so much with skills if we are on our own, and it needs two people to relate. So it really takes two people to know these skills and understand them to be able to communicate in this way. So yeah, that will hopefully be ready in about a month or so, and then that should launch.
I love it. And I know you have a book. Can you share with us your book title?
Yeah, so actually it's not out yet. I think one of them is on Amazon. I'm not sure whether it's been put out, but it'll probably be put out in the next couple of months. So one of them is a Key to Intimacy, and the other one is called Overcoming Sexual Issues. But I can send that over to you as well. And one of them is focused on very much what we talked about today, how to create the emotional foundation for a flourishing relationship. And the other one, which is Overcoming Sexual Issues, is very much focused on the emotional side of our sexuality that often is not discussed very much. You know, what are the blocks that hits our brakes from being able to really feel desire and feel more sexual, which is one of the very common issues again that couples deal with. What are the emotions that motivate our key turn-ons in our sexuality, and trying to understand that for ourselves and for our partner. So it's just very much focused on an element that is not very often discussed within sexuality.
Oh, I love it. I will definitely look forward to those books. Okay. Do you have a book called The Secret to Intimacy and Love That Lasts?
Yeah, it is, and actually, it's the same. It's gonna get a new title called Key to Intimacy, so it'll be the same
Okay.
book. So it's essentially just making the title shorter.
Oh, I got you. I got you. Okay. I love that. So, yeah, that one is on Amazon for Kindle. So I saw that
Yeah, I,
on
I
there.
think it is. I think you're right. Yeah, I'm just getting it re-edited again, so it should come out with a shorter title, but it's the same book.
Oh, perfect. I love it. Okay. So important because we all want to have that intimate, yummy relationship. Okay. So, Thomas, what is something you think is underrated?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. What I think is underrated. Let me have a think about that.
Okay.
I think we already discussed it to a degree. I think what is underrated is the potential for us to heal a human being by being seen by another human being. I think that is so underrated. I think there is nothing more healing in this world than sitting with a person that you feel close to and feeling them accept you fully for what you are. There truly is nothing more healing than that. And again, it can replace 20 years of therapy to sit with someone that is able to just accept how your experience actually is of the world. Like I said, instead of being categorized and labeled and shamed like we so often are, um, yeah, being able to have the opposite experience. And I would also say, you know, the idea that we live in a society where we're so focused on cognition and thought, which is why you said again when we talked about somatic, feeling our own body, is we often value so much to be able to explain why we feel in a certain way. And actually instead what we need to value more is our sensation and emotions, and learn that language.
Oh my gosh, that was such a beautiful answer. I loved that. And, I believe that I'm living proof of this as well, because when you were talking about the different attachments, like I know that I used to have an avoidant attachment until I met my husband. And with him, we were able to create those ingredients of the safety, the vulnerability, and the acceptance. And all of these things that I used to do to help me feel like I had control and security, such as like, I don't know, organizing everything to the 10th degree and like not being able to sleep in the dark and all of these other aspects of my life. I'm like people pleasing, all of this stuff just started to, drift away as I became more, safe and secure in my relationship. So I definitely know that when you're with a person who's willing to do these skills with you, it is so healing. So I love that you shared that. It's so good.
Oh, beautiful. And thank you for sharing that too, because you're right. That's what we all need. We all actually want to feel safe. And from that space, we can start to blossom.
Yes, so good. Okay, Thomas, what is one of your most favorite or memorable kind of dates you've ever been on?
In a good way or in a bad way?
In a good way. In a good
um,
way.
Good dates. Oh, I've been on a lot of good dates because I normally, let me have a think.
Okay, what makes a good date?
What makes for a good date? So I can only tell you personally what I feel makes a good date, because I think this is a very, very individual question. And
For
again, I
sure.
think I'm quite different compared to what most people would think is a good date. Um, so for me, a good date is something. And is this in a relationship or when you first start dating? Actually, because that makes a little bit difference.
Ooh, whichever one you want to share, whatever sounds
Okay,
more fun for you.
okay. So I think a good date is something where people give each other dedicated attention. Like I said, put away your phone, get away of all these distractions that we normally have. So really be able to be present with each other. I think it's often, for me at least, it would be sharing an activity that to some extent is exhilarating. Of course, it has to be that for both parties. And sharing a new experience together. And also because, again, it does a few different things, and especially in a long-term relationship where we know each other so well, we are so, used to each other, and it's so easy to get stuck in that comfort zone, and it's not that exciting anymore. Seeing each other in a new environment, in a new experience, allow us to see different sides of our partner that we normally don't see when we're just at home together. So it can also start helping that attraction towards our partner again. And also just having an exciting experience together in itself create more desire. Again, we know that. So it's just a wonderful way to, I guess, especially in a long term, but also in a new date, to be honest, the same, to share an experience, to have a moment together, to see each other in a new light. And again, of course, it's up to the individual people what they enjoy doing together. So dedicated attention and sharing something that get to see your partner in a new light, I think is a really good way to have a date.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love it. Okay, so Thomas, if people want to connect with you, get a hold of you, take one of your classes, all of this stuff, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can go look at sensensa.com, which is spelled Zensensa.com. Maybe you can put the link. I think my accent makes it hard to hear the spelling, but
I will
essentially
for
they can
sure.
go and they can go look at the blog, and they can go look at some free material and get some more advice and see if that's helpful for them.
Yes, I will definitely put your links. Are you on any social media for people to peek at you?
Yes, so we do have Instagram as well. I don't manage it myself. I don't have time, but yes, there should be Instagram, which should also be Sen. I think it's a dash or underscore and then sensor as well. But I don't use social media that much. And we also have a YouTube channel, which they can find, and also a podcast actually, but they should all be able to find that just searching the name Sen Sensor.
Awesome. I love it. And Thomas, last question. So, what is some advice that someone has given you that you keep in your back pocket? You can turn to it whenever you just need that little bit of uplift or the reminder that you can keep moving forward. What's a piece of advice that you've received?
Hmm. You know what? I think it's that it always comes back to me. It
Mm.
always comes back to me. So it's so easy to make everything about our partner, but I always remember it comes back to me. It comes back to my interpretation of the world, to my stories, to my triggers, yeah, it always comes back to me. It comes back to me starting with having compassion for myself so I can have that for others. And I think that's so important to remember because it's so easy to get lost in the other, and remember that at the end it start with where we are. So I always try and figure out what is it that I can learn about myself and what's happening, whether we're having a great time, whether we're having a difficult time. There's always something for me to learn, and I think that is the most important thing I've ever had as an advice, because it gives me that continuously self-reflection, which for me is the most important part.
Oh my gosh, I love that, Thomas. So you just tied in the whole episode together from the beginning of the self-awareness to the ending with the self-reflection. Thomas, you have shared some incredible wisdom with us all and skills. And I love how you just broke it down and really did make it relatable and simple for all of us to be able to apply to our own relationships. So I want to thank you so much for this time and the wisdom and just the compassion you shared with us today. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
my pleasure. It's been such a joy, and thank you for the questions.
You are so welcome, Thomas. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. And make sure to share this episode with someone and leave a review. And remember, you're worthy of incredible love.